All right, welcome back to the reality show Life Coach podcast. Today we're going to talk about season 20, episode 9 of The Bachelorette, the finale. We're finally here. And with me today, I have special guest Candice Toone. Candice, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Candice Toone. I am a former marriage and family therapist turned master certified life coach and a huge fan of The Bachelor and Bachelorette. So this is basically my dream job to come and dish on all of this with you.
Yes. And what do you do in the coaching world?
Yes. So in my coaching world, I help women stop wondering if they married the wrong guy as part of my Defying Gravity Revolution program. Super fun. And then I also host a trauma-informed community for coaches to learn how to recognize trauma responses in their clients and keep their Zoom rooms really safe for that.
And that is how I know you because I went to a workshop earlier this year. Was it this year? Yes,
Yeah.
this year
Mhm.
in Utah, and now I'm in your mentorship. So it's
So
it's
fun.
fun to me to have this experience alongside that one. So thank you for all the work
Absolutely.
that you do in the world, ma'am.
Oh, thank you.
So I know you're a huge fan of The Bachelorette, and so this is going to be fun because you've watched just like all the episodes too. So this
Mhm.
this this end one here, we're going to dish today. So I'm going to do a quick as I can show recap, and then we're going to get to it. So,
Okay.
just as a reminder for all the humans, Charity, we check back in with Charity. She is in Fiji, with Aaron B, who has come back. Of course, he wants to stay. He does stay for now, but I think I don't know. In the back of my mind, I was like, he's. It's like 2 minutes later, he's going to be out of here, which is actually what happened. Not shocking at all. She sent him home
I
in the
was
rose
so surprised
ceremony.
that she sent him home though. I was like,
Really?
I thought he was going to be the winner. But anyways.
Well, I know we're going to talk about him later because there's some
Yes.
juicy clips of him at Paradise. So, oh, and then we have the meeting of the parents. Joey goes first, and he has his very charming self. And then we have Dotton, which we'll talk about both of those experiences today,
Yes.
too. We have the final dates with both of the men, and then we have the proposals. And I don't know about you, but I hoped it was Dotton, but I was super shocked when I saw like
I was really
Joey's foot.
surprised too. Yes. With the blue suit coming out of the van, I was
Yeah.
like,
But honestly, I think I would have been equally shocked if it was Dotton that walked
I
out. Like, I don't think I
know.
was prepared for
Both
either of them to be sent home.
they were both really good guys.
Yes. And so Dotton proposes, and she says yes. They are engaged. And at the very end of the episode, Joey is announced as the next bachelor.
Hmm.
What do you think of him as the pick?
I I am worried for him, to be totally honest. Because he is like the nicest, most like self-effacing man I've ever seen on The Bachelor. And I'm like, I hope those women don't eat him alive. That's
Oh,
what I
they're
really hope.
definitely going to eat him alive. Well,
But I don't know if I hope that he can like stand up for himself in that frenzy. I hope he can because he's
I
adorable and kind.
Yeah, and like he got such a like beautiful edit this whole season, but I'm sure
Mhm.
there were moments where, he was having trouble or whatever, but they just didn't show it. So I think we're gonna
Yeah.
be,
It'll be
oh, the poor
interesting to
Joey.
see all the sides of him that they reveal in the new one.
Hmm.
And you make a good point. I
Absolutely.
was like, they did edit out like what they wanted us to see. And I sometimes forget that when I get immersed in the show. I'm like, what we see is exactly who they are. I can really get caught up in that.
Same. Same. And it was like to me, and I know we're about to talk about this, but like, when Charity's family met Dotton, I was like, how are you not in love with him? Like
That
he is
I
the
was
best
very
person.
surprised by that too. And they were really not, at least based off of what the clips showed, they were not feeling him very much at all. And I was very surprised by that because I thought for sure he would have an in with the parents. He seemed so sure of himself, so confident, so into her all season long that I was like, what are they seeing that we're not seeing?
I know. I know. It's like, how dare you? How dare you not love him? So
Right? Didn't you see the cute things that he's made for her? The
so cute.
slideshow and the treasure hunt and
Like his outfit for the Barbie scenes when he was
Mhm.
Ken, like
Yeah,
so cute. I know.
so
I
cute.
was I was very confused by that. And so I mean maybe that's what we should talk about first because if you're ready to
Yeah,
dive
yeah,
into
I'm
coachable
ready.
moments, um is like I think probably one of the juiciest scenes in this whole episode was meeting the family. Joey, he's a tennis pro. He came across very, very smooth. Family seemed to love him. Dotton,
Mhm.
not as much. And
Mhm.
I think this was really confusing for Charity like to
Yeah.
see her family's reaction. I think she thought that they were going to respond very, very differently. What
Mhm.
did you think? Like, what did you think of that interaction?
I think that I think it was hard because I really did just wonder, I'm like, what is he saying or doing that's causing that like rigidity in them? There was
Mhm.
almost like a protective wall that was like between him and them. And I didn't see anything on the clips that I was like, it makes sense they're responding that way based off of what we've seen. So there must have been something or some vibe or some energy in the room that we couldn't feel as viewers. Because
Yeah.
I just really didn't know why they didn't love him.
That's a really good point because I was also confused. I and at like one point they made a comment like, "Oh, this is the type of guy that Charity often picks."
Yes. Yes.
And so I was like, maybe that's the cause for the rigidity, but I also didn't see it though because she identified Xavier as being that type
That's
of
what I was just
person.
thinking too. I'm like, Xavier, she said, reminded her of her past boyfriends. But the whole time she had been saying, it's so easy with Dotton. There's no like coach speak mind management I have to do around him because it just flows so naturally. But if it's true that her family was sensing something that had been like heartbreaking or hurtful to her before, that would make a lot of sense that they're like, we don't want to see you go down this road again because we love you so much.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I was trying to get a read on them. Like, is this protectiveness on their part? Are they biased because they saw Joey? Is there something else going on? Like all of the above? And it's just so hard to say.
It's hard
And
to
we
know.
also, it's hard to know. And we also don't know like how much of this is an edit on the producer's part to
Yes.
throw us off the scent of Dotton getting
Yeah.
like the ring at the end, or her getting the ring from Dotton at the end. So, um,
It was
I don't
interesting in the when they interviewed the mom, just they only asked her the one question in the actual like finale. She still didn't seem that warm to him.
Yes.
And I was just surprised by that because his parents were they were sitting, the parents were sitting together,
Yeah.
and his parents were like warm and like body language, like inclusivity. And the mom, she wasn't like unkind to them, but she was definitely still like kind of feeling like I'm in my space, we're having these boundaries. And so I wonder if mom's just getting on board to be kind or if she still has some of her reservations.
Yeah, I was watching them maybe as closely as Charity had been watching them during the thing to see what they thought. Like
Hmm.
every time they showed one of those little video clips in the bottom left corner, I was like, what is mom
Uh-huh.
doing? Is she happy? Is
Yes.
she approved? And it was
Uh-huh.
just it was a weird kind of weird space to be in because I like that is exactly kind of how Charity showed up. Like she was looking to
Hmm.
her family for approval, and I'm like, I'm looking to your family for approval. So what is it like
Uh-huh.
as like a member of that family to be doing
I'm
the same thing?
sure. Yeah. And it makes sense that when Charity and her mom went outside and she's like, I just want you to tell me. And her mom was like, I'm not going to tell you. And I understand both sides of that. I understand why Charity wants to hear the truth from her family, of course, because she wants to use that information from her trusted advisors to make a big decision. And I also understand why mom said no, because mom probably doesn't want to sway her or be blamed later if it doesn't work out. And I really think if I was coaching them, I would be like, there's room here to have some warmth and connection, even if you don't change your mind about what you do. Because they both just put up their walls, it seemed like. And it was kind of like a tug of war. Tell me, don't tell me, tell me, don't tell me. And I'm curious if I was talking to them, I would be like, what's going on there that this conversation has to be contentious? Because I believe they could have disagreed about whether or not mom's going to share without having that. But it was the pulling that I think ultimately made it so hard on both of them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's such a good point too, because it makes me wonder if that's still a little bit there, just
Could be.
seeing her response. And it almost was surprising because, Charity's background as a therapist, and I don't know, I'm wondering
Mhm.
like where her mom's coming from and all of that, but it really did seem, I don't know, like hopefully they've repaired from this since then, but I have to respect her mom though for not wanting to give the wrong
Absolutely.
answers because
Yes.
yeah,
I see
yeah,
both reasons. And I just think mom could have, and I don't know what's going on for mom, of course, and it could be edits as well. But I think just as simple as being like, I know why you want me to tell you. Of course, you want me to tell you. I get that desire. And as your mother, I believe it's not best for me to say because I want it to be your choice. but I get that it sucks that I'm not telling you. I totally get that. Like even
Yeah.
that connection, I think could have made it a little bit more fluid for both of them.
Yeah, I think so too. And, it's almost like you saw a very young side of Charity come out in this
Yes,
too.
because she's like, whatever. And she kind of like storms away, which no judgment for her. I get that she probably felt super activated and like, I'm
Mhm.
not getting the support I thought I would have. And that's a surprise that I don't like dealing with. But you're absolutely right that it brings us back to our younger experience of
Mhm.
not being heard or not having our requests honored. I think that's probably what was
Do
going
you
on.
think, like, because to me, Charity seemed like maybe preteen to teenager here, like if that's
Mhm.
what personality was coming out. Do you think that impacted her mom's parenting of her in that moment? Because like, what you were describing before sounds like almost an older daughter, mother
Yeah.
type of scene.
I think probably like, of course, whatever we're doing impacts anyone we're in a relationship with. And so of course, Charity's mom could sense that Charity was not pleased with her. And then Charity's mom probably had like a little bit of a like activated response to that as well. Cause all of us want our kids to like us or people we love to be in support of us. And when we sense that's not the case, it makes sense that we kind of like slip into those familiar patterns, even if they're not the most helpful ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And and to me, it was almost like as a viewer, I wanted to see that her mom had come around because it felt so like unresolved for me. Like it felt
Yes.
so, and
Especially with this big like coming together. They're getting married, it sounds like that's still the plan. And so I everyone just wants that to be resolved before like all those memories that are going to be imprinted for life.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah. And
Yeah.
so I appreciate though that she stuck to her guns, like just like, you know what?
Yes. And I think she can stick to her guns even now and be like, I still stand by what I did and I understand why you wanted something different. There's room for both of our perspectives here, is probably the cleanest way to get to that resolution. And I want to applaud Charity too, because she is a mental health professional, I think a therapist.
Yeah.
And it just is so nice to see, oh, therapists are humans too, life coaches are humans too.
Yes.
Like we're allowed to have our own emotions, even if we have all this training. And in our professional lives, we might have responded differently. I just think that was really courageous of her and a good example of how we're all humans.
I love that because there are so many moments in my own life where it's like, well, hey, you're a coach. Like, shouldn't you
Yeah.
be able to manage your mind here? And I was just like, no, 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 I'm a messy human being right now. And
Yes.
like, it feels
And
very
it's
like
okay.
different.
It's okay. Like
Mhm.
our nervous systems give us those danger cues for a reason. And sometimes the best thing to do is just to leave the situation. It might have been better for Charity to just be like, okay, we're done talking now, so that neither one of them said something they would have regretted later.
Yeah. I do also wonder too, like if Charity actually had been confused about who she was picking in that moment. My guess is that she actually already knew it was going to be Dotton, and that's why she was
And
super
then she was a little
confused.
bit more responsive. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so if she actually had been open and like and had been wanting their opinions on things, I think maybe she would have approached her mom a little bit differently. Who's to
That's a
say?
good point. And maybe mom knew, oh, you're asking me, but you really don't want my opinion. Maybe mom could tell, right?
Maybe she might have. I mean, they
Yeah.
obviously know each other
Know each
very
other their
well.
whole lives. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's also a little bit of like my own conditioning here that like, oh, she's a mother. She should be like warm and friendly and she should be giving her daughter like a different experience. And like
Totally.
mom is herself. Like she's going to show up
Yeah.
as herself. And I appreciate that.
I think that's such a good point because I don't think I even saw that in myself that I was be like, you're supposed to make this a certain way for her. My conditioning showing as well. So
Yeah.
excellent,
Yeah.
excellent
Well, and
observation.
they kept cutting to Peter Weber, former bachelor, his mom in the audience. And I just kept on thinking about the contrast of the two women. Like, I was like, oh man, if this was a different scene in the world, Peter's mom is very much the type who would have been like, oh, you must pick this person. Like, she would have
Mm,
said, and it's just a very different relationship. But yeah, I mean, I think we're just used to seeing moms on this show that are different than how Charity's mom showed up. And so I think
yeah,
that was also impacting my viewing.
I think so too. And I noticed like um in my conditioning, like it's typically like historically, I don't know that this is like active in my life right now, but like growing up, like the dad gives permission. The dad, like the fiance to be asks the dad, "Can I have her hand?" And so it was surprising to me that her dad was so like out of that conversation.
That is a really good point because they didn't show the typical scene, which is,
Mm-mm.
the men nervously
What are your
asking for the
intentions towards
hand.
my daughter? Like all of that was absent. And it was interesting because the only input that we got from the dad, well, at least the only one that stuck out to me was when the women left the room and the dad was like, ugh. He kind of like rolled his eyes. He's like, here they go again, which just maybe goes to show the family dynamics in that, which is not right or wrong. It's just interesting to see like he might be the more passive one. And so maybe that's why she was looking to her mom so strongly, because that's usually where the approval or the guidance came from. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm just like thinking through it. Yeah, like we didn't see the typical dad. We didn't see the typical mom.
Mm-mm.
Sister was just, I have very little memory of what actually went on with her sister. And so, you
Yeah.
know, and I also think, like I said, like with Joey coming in first, they were biased by him. He puts on a good show. I'm sure he's used to
Yeah.
schmoozing with lots of people as a tennis pro. And so if Dotton's a little bit nervous, it's like, I don't know about this. So
Why is he nervous? The other guy was so
no.
smooth. Yeah. And like
Yeah,
you said
yeah.
before we started recording, the brother was totally absent, which is just fascinating to know.
Yeah.
And I don't think he was in the final rose audience either.
He wasn't. Yeah. They made him like super undercover brother. Like he was
Yeah, I
so
guess so.
undercover he wasn't
Yeah.
there. Poor Nehemiah. Like I do wonder like if Nehemiah had been there, they seem very like they have a strong sibling bond that maybe she
Yeah.
doesn't have with her sister if he would have provided something. And so maybe that's why he wasn't there because he would have
Yeah.
said,
Maybe he would have biased her more. Or maybe that's why she was seeking so much from her mom, because Nehemiah would normally give her that. I don't know. It's just
yeah.
fascinating to speculate.
I'm fascinated too. And again, I feel unresolved by it. So I might have to watch her on Dancing with the Stars to see if we have like,
To see if
and
they
here's
stay together.
mom.
And then here's mom giving her the mirror ball applause. Yeah.
Yep, yep. Any other thoughts on that before we move on?
I noted, well, I guess we are kind of moving on, but speaking of like watching it in the future to see how it goes, when she came out to talk to Joey, she wasn't wearing her ring.
Hmm.
And so I was like, oh no, because they always say like the most shocking thing that's ever happened. And I was worried that they had broken up or something because she wasn't wearing her ring then. And I don't know if they just didn't want spoilers, or I don't know why she wouldn't have been wearing her ring. But when they came out and I saw them together, like they looked, from all intents and purposes, from what I could see, like they were super happy. So that made me feel a little more resolved around what we saw in Fiji. It's like, okay,
Yeah, at least their
maybe their
relationship
bond
felt.
can convince them. Yeah, maybe mom will see in time, but this was a good choice.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
yeah. And if like his season on The Bachelor is a total train wreck, that might also seal the deal for
Yeah.
him.
You're like, oh, dodged a bullet. We didn't even know.
Oh man. Well, speaking of like, I'm sure this is going to be a dumpster fire. We're going to talk about like we saw some clips of Aaron B and all of Bachelor in Paradise, which I think
Yes.
to me that's my favorite of all the Bachelor franchise. It's just ridiculous and it's wonderful. They bring on all the castaways to go to
Oh my
an
goodness.
island
It's
and
such an
hook up.
interesting like strategy, right? You
Hmm.
couldn't find love here, so let's send you to Debauchery Island. See, and give you a little bit of a vacay. Oh, it's just crazy. But go on.
It is just crazy. Well, you wanted to talk about because we had some interesting scenes where you see like Aaron B. lovey-dovey over Charity,
And like
and then
flying
cut to
across the world to like,
yes,
you are the mother of my children, he said. And I'm like, he was like for real serious. But then not even 6 months later, he was over it, I guess.
yeah. I'm always amazed by that though, because it's just like, or like Joey becoming the Bachelor. Like,
Yeah.
okay, like how, this makes zero sense in my head. We just watch you being heartbroken,
Yes.
and
And
now
it's
you're ready
like,
for love.
what's the grieving period? And like, I do wonder like the emotional, like hopping from one relationship to another. I mean, maybe it'll be fine and they really did get the closure they needed, but I don't know if anyone's vetting that. I don't know if they're vetting that themselves, and I worry about it a little bit.
I do too, because honestly, if they were vetting it, they'd be vetting it to make sure they were still grieving so that they would have good
Hmm.
TV. Like, I think they would use it against the contestants in
It's
some way,
so
shape, or
true.
form.
They like to stir the pot and poke at it just because of the way that this is set up. Which brings us to an interesting thing that you mentioned is they always say, "Well, I signed up for that. I signed up for that."
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
a natural transition to be like, yes, they did sign up for it, and what exactly does that mean? Does that mean we
Mhm.
get to like invalidate their emotions, or that we get to be like, I don't know, sorry, you're famous, so that comes with the territory, so suck it up? I don't know. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I think about that in lots of different contexts. It could be like, well, you started out your own business. Of course, it's going to be kind of like roller coaster. Well, you got married. Like, of course, it's going to be like. I feel like we could say that about a lot of things, but it's specifically said about people on reality TV of like, you signed up for this, so therefore you shouldn't get to
You
feel,
don't
have an
get to do
experience.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Mm.
I don't
I
know.
think I think the phrase
Yeah.
is interesting in that, like, I think it's actually it can be a healthy phrase. I did sign up for this. I knew what to expect. So, yes, I had consent here. And consent doesn't mean that I wouldn't have a human response. I think that's the part, if we go way to that side, that and we expect them to just like roll with it just because they signed up for it. I think that part is unhealthy. But the very initial, I did sign up for this. I knew what I was getting into. So I support myself in my decision to be here. And I still can have my feelings, which I think makes Brayden an interesting character, actually. I know we're supposed to talk about episode 20,
He's
but I just
good.
want to throw back to him for a minute because he really embodied that, I think. He's like, I knew what I signed up for. And by the way, I think it wasn't a good choice for me to sign up for just being here with like competing with all these guys. And he got hated for that, which I felt bad for Brayden because I was like, listen, all he's saying is that this environment doesn't work for him and he's not sure he can like fall in love with a stranger while 20 other people are always falling in love with him, or in love with her. And I actually like appreciated that about him. That's some honesty that he didn't hold himself to. I have to feel a certain way just because I signed the paperwork.
Yes. I've been going back and forth on that all season because I think when you're like commenting it on a real time, you're like, how dare you, Brayden? But then in reflection, it is really like, yeah, well, even if you sign up for something, how are you supposed to know what it's like? Like if you already knew
Yeah.
what it was going to be like, you might not even do it in the first place. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
never had the experience of dating X amount of people at the same time. I'm sure you haven't had.
Never, never.
How do we
So
know?
we can like guess at what it might be like, but then if the reality proves to be different, the thing that again really struck me about Brayden is he was just honest about it.
Hmm.
Whereas, like, nothing against Aaron. I don't know Aaron at all, but he was like, no, I'm 100% into Charity the entire time. And then, except for as soon as I'm dumped, I'm just over here with all these ladies on the Bachelorette or the Bachelor Pad or whatever it is, Bachelor in Paradise.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, it sounds a little bit like it's possible that if we require ourselves to be like, I signed up for this, I'm all in, and that's the mark of success, we might be disconnecting from ourselves a little bit.
Hmm.
And that
Yeah.
might be why they didn't like Brayden, is because he didn't disconnect from himself, even if he was kind of like an a-hole maybe, but he was at least being really, really honest that whole time, which is just interesting.
It is interesting. No, you're right. Because if you say, I signed up for this, so therefore I shouldn't feel, you would be disconnected the whole time. And that's the like socially acceptable way on The Bachelor. Like that's how you're supposed to behave.
It's the
Is
worst way to build a relationship though. So
totally.
so no
Yeah.
wonder many couples fail because they've been playing a part this whole time, well-meaning, I'm sure, because they want to be like in for the process and whatever that means. But then if they have had to kind of like divorce parts of themselves all the way along, it makes sense that when cameras stop rolling, it's those parts come back in and it's hard to navigate.
Yeah. And I think that's maybe why I found myself drawn to Dotton is I felt like he wasn't disconnecting as much as maybe the other men were. It felt like you were
Mhm.
getting maybe a little bit more of a genuine response. Like obviously after the cameras roll, it's they have to like basically meet each other all over again. Like, hey, what's your phone number? Also, I need to
Yeah.
know everything about you.
Yeah.
So, but I got a sense that he was trying to figure out the game as he was playing it, and the other guys were like, I know how this goes. I'm supposed to shut off
Mm.
right now. And so,
Yeah. And unconsciously for the most part and without ill intent, right? It's just the socialization, especially because it's been on for what, like 400 seasons. So
yeah,
people know what it's like. At least they think they do. So yeah, I think you're right. Like having to play by the rules is a challenging way to build a relationship.
yeah. And I think it's totally makes sense to me why they all bond with each other because who else in the world is really
It's like
gonna like
Stockholm
know what it's
syndrome
like? Yes.
in a very like, that was sort of flippant, but it's kind of like we're all going through this event together that really truly no one else understands. No one else understands what it's like to be in this house under scrutiny, deciding, I know I'm supposed to be in love with this girl, but I actually don't even know her. Or maybe I am starting to be in love with her and I don't, and all of you are too. Like nobody knows what that's like except for them. So of course they'd bond.
Totally. And like nobody wants to take a step back and be like, hey, you know what? Charity has expressed to us like what a big deal infidelity is for her. But I'm not allowed to see what she's doing as like,
Mm-hmm. As
like
yeah, that's
cheating on
so
me.
that's such a good point.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
So
like I guess it's not infidelity because the disclosure is there, but I don't, and I guess the in consent is sort of implied because they signed up for it again. There's that phrase.
yeah,
But it probably does bring up some unexpected feelings when they're like, I knew that would happen, but seeing it actually happen feels different than what I
yeah.
thought.
But then you're not allowed to feel it because
No,
you
because
signed
you
up for
signed
it.
up for it. Yeah.
Yeah. The only time you really see the rules bend around that is around fantasy suites. We didn't see it on this season, but lots of other seasons. And maybe you remember this. It's like, okay, you can go to the fantasy suites, but you're not allowed to like sleep with somebody. Or you can like, I'm gonna like
Hmm.
express to
Like
you
they
how
have
I want
those
you to break the
conversations
rules.
out loud.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, or there's an
Interesting.
expectation of, hey, if you told me that you love me, then you're not going to do X, Y, and Z with this other person. And
Yeah,
it's kind of a gray zone on this show of what the
it
rules
really
are
is.
in a
Hmm.
very, very structured rule system of
Hmm.
the show.
That's a good point. And I can imagine how that would be really challenging to deal with. Because for Charity, from her perspective, or anyone that's like the Bachelor or the Bachelorette, like they're like, I want to make the most of this experience and I really want to like flesh out my relationships with everyone. So I don't want to have my rules, probably. That would make
Hmm.
sense if they didn't want that. But it also makes sense that their suitors, their contestants would be like, but if I'm supposed to commit to you, how do we have those separate rules? How do we have those uneven rules like that?
Hmm.
That would be very challenging to manage. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Something I was just like thinking about as you were talking was like, I wonder what it's like to watch this show back. Like sitting, are they watching it sitting alongside their partner and you're seeing like
You're like,
her
you
have
did
emotional
that?
connections?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Because there's no
And
rules after the cameras stop
no,
rolling.
and we don't want to be angry with them, but I think it would be natural if we were. You're like, but we just yesterday you said this to me and now you're saying that to like that. I think that would be really hard.
Hmm.
If I was the Bachelorette, I might be like, let's never watch that.
100%. And if you have children someday, don't watch
Oh yeah.
that. Do not. Oh, can't even
Mm-mm, don't go
imagine.
in there. But I'm sure they
Because
all do. It would be hard to not. You'd be so curious, I bet.
oh, you'd be so curious. And also, like, who doesn't want to watch their love story played out again?
Yeah, you're like, I wonder, this is what they should do. ABC should be like, we're going to edit out so it's just you guys. That's our wedding present to you. ABC, if you're listening to this podcast, I think that would be a beautiful present that you could do for the couple. Edit out everyone else, just do the scenes of them. Like
Yeah,
that
or
one.
if you leave them in, go back and give them terrible edits.
Yes,
Like,
yes.
either
Be
way.
like, obviously you should have chosen me. Look at him.
He's got spinach in his teeth, of course.
It's
But
ridiculous.
I also wonder too, like how much watching it back impacts your own narrative around your story, your love story. It's
Yeah.
like being narrated by ABC. So she's watching it back. She and Dotton, Joey, all of them have their initial experience of like, we were there, cameras were on us, but then it's just like watch it back and see yourself as a character alongside your partner, who is also a character, of like,
Mhm.
how does that impact your thoughts on the relationship?
It's yes, for sure. And especially after like 5 years into the marriage, if you end up getting married, like no one's following you around anymore. No one's like, and so it's probably an interesting transition from like our life is produced right here as we got to know each other, and then it so isn't.
Mm.
And how do we navigate that change? We can love and honor that experience, but can we still like create this connection for ourselves without all the extra production value?
And I'm sure they provide zero support on how that might
Zero.
look.
But by the way, you should come back many seasons later and still like bring your audience with you, Trista, that was 20 years ago. Bring your audience with you because we want you to be on the show today. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things I really want to like get your take on is just like unrequited love. We
Mm,
see that scene with her and Joey. Obviously, they have gone their separate ways. I get a sense that maybe the consolation prize of being the bachelor has helped him maybe like mentally move on a little bit, just in thinking about like how
maybe.
he's maybe not. But
Yeah.
I just wonder, and thinking about your niche, like maybe I picked the wrong guy. Like, I
Hmm.
wonder when you don't have, I don't know. A lot of people think about like, oh, if I broke up with somebody,
So many people think that it would be different if
it's
I had done something else.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I just wonder, like, maybe there's no grieving process there with Joey. Like I just wonder if there's a what if that goes on in her brain and how somebody might work through that. Like work through letting that relationship go so you can be fully present in the new one.
And he said, and I respect this about him. I don't know if it was genuine or not. But he said he's very poised in the final rose discussions. And he said watching the footage back of her and Dotton was helpful for him
Mm.
because that might bring him some closure in that he's like, oh, I see how she was looking at him. I can see it. I think that would really help me. If I could be like, oh, well, comparatively, obviously, I think that might have helped. So, and I think there's something to be said for just because we're talking about, you asked me about
I
Charity,
think
but I
both
talked to you about
sides. I
Joey.
think there's both sides.
With Charity, I think, and with everyone, my personal belief is, and take it for what it's worth, is like you could be happy with multiple people. I really think that's true. I don't really believe in like that there's only one person, just because we've seen so many people like widows and things that get married again and are still happy, right? So I just don't think it's true, and I think it's a painful belief. So for her, I would just be like, listen, you chose Dotton for a reason. Your job for the rest of your relationship is to connect to those reasons. And if you want the relationship to keep going, then we want to stay connected to that. And if you have new information that comes up about Dotton, then you can make a new decision at that point. But until we have any new information, you picked Dotton. So it's in service to your relationship to stay focused over there.
Mm.
And wondering about Joey just takes away from that. And so it's less about like the relationship with Joey or Dotton, and it's more about the relationship with herself, I think. Like, can I trust my own decisions? Can I trust myself to make a new decision if like, I don't know, Dotton starts doing something that's unacceptable to her? Can I trust myself to make a new decision? So it's really more of that. Like, can I have a relationship with myself that puts me in charge, and I'm going to support myself in the decision I made until I have a really good reason not to?
Yeah.
Which I think she might already be kind of good at because she sent Aaron home and she sent Xavier home without, like, she's like, could have had a free night with him or whatever, but she's like, nope, I know what I want. I know who I am. So I think she just wants to keep exercising those muscles, even though, like, when Dotton leaves his socks on the floor or whatever, she might be like, Joey wouldn't have done that. But we just want to like pull our brains back to like, I picked him for a reason. Is this current thing reason enough for me to doubt myself or not? That's what I think.
Well, and I think that's probably what makes it so important that her mom didn't tell her who she should
Yes.
pick, because now when she falls back, she should be like, no, this is my decision versus,
Mhm.
oh, this is who my family thought I should pick, and I wasn't
Yeah.
totally
Now I
into
can
it.
kind of like blame them,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is why possibly it sounded like that was mainly mom's reason for not. It's like, I want you to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. And she said, I believe you know, Charity, and I want you to just strengthen that relationship between you and you to make decisions you can stand by.
Yeah. And maybe in that light, like it's actually awesome that her family seemed to like Joey more
Yeah.
than Dotton, because there she is going, huh, that's very confusing to me. But also, Dotton
But
is my
I
person.
know what I know, and I'm going to go this way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I like that idea of like just redirecting to the relationship you chose, because our brains are just going to want to naturally go there, probably especially if she's like watching it back and seeing like how delighted she was by Joey. There's
Mhm.
like they had a beautiful relationship.
Yeah.
But like on the podcast I've described it more, it seems like a summer fling, like hot girl
Yeah.
summer with Joey versus Dot. And I really see like out of many of the couples I've seen go through this show, I'm like, I actually legitimately think that they could have a relationship.
Yeah. And they were both so mindful of each other, and the things that he did for her, I mean, the things don't cause our feelings, of course, but like just the thought he put into like documenting their time together or highlighting their special moments. Like, he's clearly focused on them. And I love what he said at some point. He said, we never talk about anyone else. We only just talk about ourselves, like all through all of their dates. Because sometimes men come on and they're like, well, this guy said that, and it's really hard for me but Dotton didn't do any of that because he was, it looks like, directing his brain towards this is what I want to be. This is where I am. This is my goal. And he was taking full responsibility for himself. And as long as Charity does that for her own decisions as well, I think it will just stay strong.
Yeah, I get a sense that she will. Like they both strike
Seems
me as the
like
type
it.
that want to fight for it. Yeah.
It does seem that way. She's very feisty in the best way. She's like, this is what's okay. This is not what's okay. Mm-mm.
And just also seeing like her parents' dynamic, I was like, oh, okay, like Charity seems the outgoing one, and maybe Dalton's a little bit more passive like her dad is. Like
Yeah,
maybe it's
yeah,
what she's kind of drawn to, who knows? But
could be.
um yeah, it's just I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I don't see her getting back together with anybody else if she broke up with Dalton. I think she would move forward in life,
Like on
but
to new relationships, and hopefully they
yeah,
stay. I think they're adorable. So
I think so too. I was pleased with that. I think there's maybe like one last thing, one or two last things I had on the list here. Um, oh yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is on proposal day.
mhm.
Obviously, everybody has these really big emotions, like
Yes. Hmm.
Um, Charity has, okay, delighted because I'm about to get together with Dutton. Sorry about the lawnmower.
It's
And then,
fine.
devastation, Joey. Like, I'm going to have to break up with Joey. I mean, obviously, the men both have these wide range. They're either going to get the answer they want or don't want on this day that's coming up. And
Yeah.
how would you recommend that somebody, like, supports themselves through that?
Yes. So again, I think this would be a time where it's useful to bring back in the phrase, I signed up for this. I signed up for this, meaning I signed up on purpose to have big emotions today. So there's nothing wrong with me if I have big emotions. It's not, I signed up for this, and so I should just have expected that, like, I'm kind of like just even keel. No, no, no. I signed up to do an experience that would elicit big emotions from me. So if I have big emotions, it makes sense, and there's nothing wrong with me, is what I would go into it saying. And then what I like to tell my clients, and what I would tell these people if they asked me, is like, I would just connect with yourself as much as possible by narrating it. I feel upset now because I'm thinking I'm breaking this guy's heart. Of course, I feel upset because that's the story I'm telling, and maybe it's even true. And I don't want to break his heart, so it makes sense that I feel all this panic, all of this, like, oh, it makes sense given what's going on right now. And
Yeah.
the more we can just say, my emotions make sense given the experience I opted into. And I expected it might be like this. Kind of like when I take my kid to the dentist, I'm like, it's going to be a little scary. You're probably going to feel scared while you're there. Nothing wrong with you if you feel scared, and we can handle it. That's probably where I would go. And then be like, and it might seem weird in normal life to go from devastated to elated in that short window. And that is what we signed up for here. So it's not weird. You're not weird that you went from devastated to elated. We just on purpose packed those experiences right back to back, which is kind of unusual.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it doesn't
I
mean
like
you're
that.
unusual. It just means, like, yeah, that's how that goes. It makes sense.
Right. And I think for all three of them, they put their, like, them as much of their whole self that they could into this. So it does make sense that you're feeling big
Yeah.
emotions. And, it
Nothing
would be a
wrong
little
with you.
weird at this point. No, nothing wrong with you. I like what you had to say about like narrating the experience and just kind of like maybe taking a step back and watching it as it's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it almost sounds like maybe the mothering that Charity was looking for, like that, the
Yeah.
way that you just said that there just really seemed like very like kind and like they were being like, kind of like a parent had stepped in to talk to them in the moment.
Yeah. And that might be one of the ways that watching it back could be helpful, because we as the consumers of the show, we naturally do that because we are actually watching it, right? And so if they watch it back with that lens, like, oh, I'm watching a character, of course that character has those experiences, it makes sense that I would have too. That might be useful.
I could see that too. Yeah. Yeah. And they might have like in doing this, like I got the impression from the very early part of the season that Charity is like, okay, I'm gonna like manage myself through this. I have all the skills and everything. So I think when she got to this point, she did seem a little bit surprised, like a little bit like, oh, there's a lot going on here. And so
Yeah.
like, of course you are. Um,
Maybe
but
even because she had thoughts like, I'm a therapist. So of course I'll do better at this.
yeah, yeah. And I honest, like, I mean, and watching it, I do think that she did do a little bit
Yeah,
better.
she did amazing.
I
Yeah.
know. I was incredibly impressed because honestly, like it's risky for her to career to come onto a show like
It
this
really is. Yeah. Yeah,
if she
for
wants to
sure.
keep with it. Very risky. So, um, but yeah, I wonder if just watching that back with her, like what that experience is like. But it's nice to see her display of emotion because it might have been helpful for Joey too because he mentioned he blacked out in that moment
Of
when
course you
she.
did, right?
Of course he did.
That's like a serious surprise that you were not expecting. Like all the protective functions come up right then, of course. Yes.
Of course. Yeah. Well, was there anything else like on your mind that you wanted to talk about before we wrap it up today?
I do want to talk a little bit, and maybe I just want you to help me with this, but like I was kind of mad at the way that she treated Joey when she, because I was like, listen, lady, like I love Charity, but I'm like, she let him go on and on for a long time. And I was like, I think the kindest thing to have done there would have been to cut it off sooner. But, and so I'm really curious about why she did that. Like she had to stop him from kneeling down. And I'm like, that went too far in my opinion. So I'm curious to know if it's like the producers are like, you have to let him get through his whole thing or not. But I have seen on previous episodes that like some or previous seasons, like sometimes they don't even let them come to the proposal thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm just so curious about why they did that. And then afterwards, he was comforting her.
Yes.
And I was like, I was angry on his behalf about that because I'm like, listen, Charity, you're the decision maker here. So I kind of wanted her to be like, I'm going to go manage my emotions with my fiance or with my parents. And I'm not going to like make you, the guy I'm dumping, take on my emotions. So I'm just curious to know what you thought about that.
Oh, man, as you're talking, I can tell how much I like a contestant based on how much I blame the producers for what happened. Because I was like, Charity would never do that. She would have
Uh,
like gone to his hotel room in the morning and taken him to the side and sat down next to him versus like
yeah.
so
And you might be totally right, but I just thought, I'm like, she's letting him go on quite a bit. And then afterwards he was like directing her to not step in the mud and he's like, it's
I
okay.
know.
And I could see like he was trying to pull away from like holding her hands, but she was like holding on. And I'm like, I get that because she says she loved both of them and it was really hard to let him go. But I'm like, you also need to let him go.
I
So,
agree. Yeah, no, he immediately was like taking care of her and
which is why I'm worried about him next season. I'm like,
same.
okay, come on, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hope that he finds in the next season, like I hope he lets it be about him. At least
Mm.
not like completely, maybe, because he's not the kind of guy that would do that. But I'm like, I hope that you find room for yourself in the relationships that you're going to have. Because if the relationship is all about serving the one person, I think that's not very sustainable. And I hope that he finds room for both of them to be strong members and have both of their needs met in whatever relationship he has moving forward.
No, I'm worried about him too because when they were doing that after the final rose, he came on stage and I think the first thing that they like when they were talking to each other, he was like, "No, no, I care about how you feel and your experience." I don't remember exactly what he said, but
Yes,
it was
that was very
definitely
much the vibe.
redirected.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so I guess I am very concerned for him in his season because of that tendency, and I also think he's going to have a really hard time sending people home and giving very clear
Yeah.
messages on like, I like you, but I don't see a future. I think I could see him
That's true.
having a
He's
tendency
probably
to
going to
lead
have a
people
hard
on.
time. Yes. And not with ill intent, but just because it's so uncomfortable for him to be honest about himself, it sounds like.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, he's talked about being a people pleaser on the show, and so of course he's not going to want to do anything that he thinks going to cause harm to another human. But
Right.
that's the show. Like that's why they picked him for
That's
the
that's
show.
it. Which again is so beautiful on the producer's part because I probably wouldn't have watched next season, but now I'm like, but it's Joey. I gotta like see if he's gonna be okay.
I know.
So
I'm like have these
they're very
fantasies
good
about like it's
teasers.
going to be a train wreck, but then also like the Golden Bachelor Jerry. I think he's going to like. I want him to like come in and be like, "Let me help you, Joey. Like, let me help you."
Yes, let
No,
me
I think it's going to
advise
be a
you.
train wreck.
Ugh.
I
Well,
know.
maybe we'll have to have another conversation about it then because I'm like, oh, Joey. I hope Joey's family like comes in to rally around him. I hope. We'll see. But
I hope so too. I don't know. I was a little bit worried at his hometowns that they were very protective of him. So
mhm.
it's like I would actually love to see his family do what Charity's family did for her, which is kind of like, no, I believe in you and you can do this.
Yes.
And I don't know if
When
his family
when
will do that
when
for him.
Joey's family was a little bit like, we kind of doubt you actually. And
Yeah.
so maybe they
Yeah.
should just fly us there. So if the ABC
Oh,
producers are listening, you and I can be his coaches in the back and we're gonna be like, listen, here's you're allowed to want what you want, Joey. It doesn't mean that other like everyone on the show is a resourced human, which means that you don't have to take care of all of them. Let's just let you take care of you. Because when you're taking care of Joey, this is what I'd say to him, when you're taken care of, it's just going to be so much easier for you to feed into a relationship that nurtures the both of you. But when you're depleted, it's just not going to last. So Joey, if you're listening, I have my heart going out for you, and please make room for yourself in your own relationship.
Same. And also, like, take a cue from Charity. If you need a break, it's okay to take a break. It doesn't matter if you still have one final rose to hand out. Just take a
Yes,
break,
take a
collect
break,
yourself.
collect yourself, stay connected with you and what you want, because this is your marriage. This is your life. You deserve to have a room in it.
That is beautiful. Well, on that note, Candice, we are
So fun to
complete
talk
on
to
this
you.
conversation for today. But yeah,
Yes,
so good
I
to talk
love
to
it.
you. And where would somebody like go looking if they're gonna look for you online?
Yeah, if you want to find me, my website is CandiceToone.com, Candice with an I, Toone with an E. Also at Candice Toone Coaching on Instagram. And I'd love to hear you if you want
Yes.
to reach out.
And I'll have links in the show notes, of course. So, well,
Perfect.
Candice, thank you so much for coming on. It was a blast.
It was so fun to talk to you, and we'll see you around. Take care,
Right.
Lynn.